Hello and welcome to the Ignite Community Podcast, where our goal is to equip, inform, and challenge. My name is Josh, and I'm your host today, and I'm joined by Pastor Jake and Pastor Brittany. Our focus today is going to be on constructive criticism. This ought to be fun. So let me just first go ahead and give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves, tell a little bit about what you do here at Ignite, and maybe anything that would be relevant to this conversation.
Well, I'm Jake Moore, and I'm the executive pastor. Get the privilege of serving and leading our staff. So when it comes to leadership, got to deal with criticism from both sides on a regular basis.
And I'm Brittany Shifflett. I'm the Ignite Kids pastor, and I have I'm in charge of kids birth through 5th grade, but I also manage a volunteer team of about 75 volunteers on a weekly basis. So I have some good constructive feedback to give to my volunteers.
Yeah.
Okay. So we all know that pastors never face criticism of any kind, being in such a loved and established position that we have. But in all seriousness, constructive criticism, that is a loaded word for most people. How would you, before we even start, how would you define what that is?
Well, okay, I'll start. When it comes to criticism, if you look at like the idea of the basis of it, it is like a disapproval of something. And so when people disapprove of something, you kind of vocalize that. Well, the constructive aspect of that is being able to communicate with somebody that builds them up rather than tears them down. So it would be more as a positive thing, even though sometimes we look at it as still a negative thing.
Yeah, I would just add that to me, constructive criticism is something that is feedback, but it always has a solution or some sort of offering to make something better.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, so I think the key thing that you guys said is that constructive criticism kind of has a point, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what makes, constructive criticism different than just being critical?
I think being critical is just saying like this is wrong and then just leaving it. And so for when you're giving constructive criticism, it's that you always want to make something better. Right. So you always want to better it in some way, shape, or form. And so just seeing a different angle or a different perspective is just why we offer constructive criticism. A lot of times I think people feel like they have to implement what this criticism is or how to fix it, but really it's just an offering of a suggestion, and you can take it or leave it. So it's really like, if it's not good, you don't have to do anything about it.
Yeah, I think that's why, I referred it to like the building up of something, construction or constructive behaviors it's interesting that it's piece by piece, it's brick by brick, it's mortar. There's a lot of things that go into constructive criticism. And so being able to filter the good and the bad from people, it's really about a response and how you respond to somebody giving you feedback. And I think feedback is really a better term for us to handle, especially in the world when we're kind of offended by a lot of different things.
Feedback's less loaded, right?
Yes, less loaded. So you kind of pointed that out, loaded question. But it's about building up. It's about piece by piece, helping to achieve something successful in the end.
Yeah. Yes. I guess I like to think of it as, my wife being the difference between, hey, Josh, the meal you made is awful, as opposed to constructively saying, hey, you could have cooked that for a little less time and it wouldn't have been burnt. It's constructive. It has a point. Okay, so both of you are uniquely placed leaders, okay? Leaders in some way. And I know if you ever spent any time with Pastor Jake, he's all about leadership. Why is it important to be able to give and receive constructive criticism as a leader?
Yeah, I would say as a leader, you always are wanting to strive to be better for the betterment of whatever you're trying to accomplish. So in my case, I always want my ministry to be better. And so it's like, I need to always be open to constructive criticism. I need to always be open to feedback. And like I said, it may not be great feedback that I want to implement, but at least it's someone's opinion or someone's view from a different standpoint. I think for me, I always try to poll my audience. I always try to ask for feedback because I want to know, okay, from your angle, how did you see this? Or from, somebody who's completely removed from the situation, how did you view it? And so sometimes we get really caught up and we only see what we only know. And so we want to be open to just making sure that we're allowing other people to speak into what we're doing, but definitely always wanting to be better at what we're doing.
Yeah. It's a perspective thing. So, if you are a person who is in the HVAC world, when you walk into a restaurant, you're like looking at the HVACs, or if you're an electrician, you're like, why is that outlet in the wrong place? You're always thinking about these things because you have this viewpoint or this perspective. And so, in leadership, especially in ministry, like we wear a lot of hats, we do a lot of different things. We have to minister to a lot of different people. When you think about the size of church we are, and there are people of so many different ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomical statuses. You think of people with kids, without kids, older or younger. And so there are so many different perspectives and optics when it comes to like how we're leading or how we're ministering to people. And so being willing is the first key, is being willing to receive feedback, receive constructive criticism, but also just being aware that like there are people who will see things that we'll never see. Just like the HVAC person, like I walk into a restaurant, I don't care what the air vents look like up in the ceiling, but they really do. And so there are people that will be able to speak truth into our ministries, into our leadership, if we're really willing to do such a thing. And it's not an easy thing to receive it at all.
Yeah.
That's good. One of the unique things about being a pastor is there are plenty of opportunities to receive criticism. How do you decide when you receive it whether that criticism is actually constructive? In other words, how do you filter it to know like, okay, this is something I should consider? But if you're getting criticism from all the kinds of different angles, not all of it is good, right? How do you know what you should filter, what you should take into account?
Well, I'm going to jump in here first. I'm going to steal your thunder right here.
I know.
Well, I don't think there's any real clear metrics to grade this by. So you have to really just pray and have a lot of good discernment. And really it's about putting people around you that you value. And so if you just take criticism from just anyone, just per se, you're going to get things that are even relevant to our mission, our vision, our values, and the things that people might think that they can speak into, but it really is kind of irrelevant of the direction that we're going. And so what we really have to do is guard against that. So we put great people in positions of leadership and teams, advisory roles, those type of things, people that have shared values, but people that understand our mission more importantly and our vision more importantly than anything else. And when we put those people around us, we now open ourselves up to be able to hear things that, man, it would be so hard. But because we put those people around us, now we can say, hey, I've got an attentive ear for this, and I can now be able to filter it. Even you still have to filter it, but be able to filter it through a different lens, because it can definitely feel like an attack if it's just coming from many different directions. But when it's coming from people with shared values, now all of a sudden I'm listening. Just like my wife. If my wife tells me something, I'm going to listen. If some stranger that I find in the Walmart aisle tells me something, I'm probably not going to listen to that very much in comparison to my wife. It's because my wife understands me. She understands what I value, and we're going in the same direction in life. That's probably the most important thing for me.
Yeah, all of that, but also the biggest thing is just to consider the source and just thinking through, I am so much more open to people with wild ideas if they're already in the trenches with me. Right. And so it's they get what I'm doing. They understand where we're going, why we're going there, and what that looks like. And so it's it's easier for me to filter out people who I know already get what we're doing and why we're doing it. So
that's right.
Yeah, it seems like the key between all of you is sometimes noise comes from people who don't really know us, whereas we tend to lend credence to people we know care about us, for it to be viewed as between criticism and constructive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, just for Brittany.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
And I know personally, one of the things I remember talking to Jake about this, when we first started having our meetings, is how much easier it was for me as a boss in my old job to provide constructive criticism to the people under me, because it was we were paying them to do a job. You have a unique position. You mentioned talking about 75 volunteers. None of them are being paid. So how do you give them constructive criticism, knowing that there's no incentive other than them wanting to do it?
Yeah, I think the difference in giving constructive criticism to a paid person or a paid staff member versus a volunteer is you have to you can hold a person that's paid to a higher standard because you've spent more time explaining the why behind what you're doing. And so like there should be a higher standard for someone who is paid because it's like you've spent more time with them and they should have a lot of buy-in to what you're already doing. And so it's easier to say, well, we fell short here and this is why, and like to see that and what we're doing to fix it because I've allowed myself to sew into them a lot more. Volunteers, I have to pick and choose, honestly, my battles a lot of the time because it's like I can only expect like so much from somebody who's not paid, but it's like I want to energize them and I want them to buy into the why in a lot of other ways so that their buy-in is just as equal as somebody who's paid. And so a lot of times with volunteers, I just have to put a little bit more sugar on what I say, which is, or in a different aspect. A lot of times I'm more of a let's correct in a general sense rather than a direct one person sense. So it's like, oh, we're missing the mark here. Like, let's make a generalized announcement over how we can do it better. So nobody actually feels like I'm super singling them out because nobody likes that. But with a paid person, you can definitely be like, this is something we need to address and how we can change it to be better.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you do a great job of that.
Thank you.
Now, Pastor Jake is in a unique position as well. He's our executive pastor. So if you don't know, he only reports to Jason, and he also deals with all our executive, for better or worse, as easy way of putting it is he can fire all of us. He is I joke, but he's our boss. And so we report to you directly. And so you are dealing with more paid employees. How is that different from what Brittany is talking about when you're talking about constructive criticism?
Well, sometimes it seems like it would be easier, and like to throw a little bit of additional information into Brittany's world, we view things differently, and it's okay. In leadership, you can not always agree on how to handle situations, and so, like for instance, for me, and I'm a pretty hard person sometimes, but even in volunteer status, what I have found in leadership, and I'm a student of leadership, but what I've found is that people naturally want expectations because we, without clarity, like we just kind of wander around. And so whether you're paid or you're volunteer, like to know what is expected of me is really, really important. So it's about vision casting and it's the things that Brittany does so well here at our church with our volunteer staff, especially in the kids ministry. But it's like, if we keep the bar at a certain level, whether they're paid or whether they're volunteer, people naturally, they're going to fall short no matter what expectations you give them or clarity, job descriptions, whatever it is. And so like, I've just realized that over the years, they're going to fall short. And so here's the thing is what we do. We raise the bar. And so not out of the reach kind of expectation, but raise the bar. So volunteer, paid, whatever, raise the bar. They're still going to fall short, guys. But now their short is going to be so much higher than what your previous expectations were. So speaking that into casting vision, leading strongly, and just being really clear. Now on the paid side, it does seem like it's a lot easier. Like for instance, these guys and our other staff, they meet with me once a week for about an hour. And it's not really an option, I mean, like we miss sometimes, but we don't. It's not an option, and so sometimes it can be easier to kind of speak something in with authority, but authority only gets you so far. And so John Maxwell talks about leadership, and leadership is influence, and that's it. And so, like. These guys and our other team, people will do what I say because I tell them to do it. But it means so much more and it goes so much further when we can lead by influence or direction or just team collaboration. And now they're not doing it because you're told to do it. You're doing it because you understand that there's buy-in, there's vision, and it's going to help you be more successful. And so whether you're looking at it from a volunteer perspective or a paid perspective, if you influence people in a very positive way in leadership, they will do anything for you and they will help you be successful. But ultimately, they're the ones that are successful.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so you, to me, are the Yoda of leadership, the Mr. Miyagi of business. I've been giving you, constructive criticism on your haircut. You haven't changed that.
No luck there, buddy.
What about those at home that are watching this, and it's like every time I try to give constructive criticism, they're thinking, it doesn't go well, or the person doesn't understand. Is there a secret sauce? Is there a format to how you give it? Is there something you follow a guideline when you're going to give constructive criticism that makes it received better?
I think the biggest thing that always goes further with me is people are able to receive constructive criticism so much better when you already have an established relationship with them. They already know that you're for them. They already know that you want what's best for them. They already know that like you really do want like them to do really great things. So I think like they're much more open to receiving it. And that's the biggest part on like, it's not always how you give it, although your tone and things like that, timing, place, who's around, like all those things play a factor into how you give good constructive criticism. But also like with people, you have to make sure that they understand where you're coming from and your heart behind what you're about to say in order to be able to receive it. Because I think the receiving end is just as hard as the giving end. Yes, so it's like it only is effective if both ends are open to what you're saying and why you're saying it.
Yeah. The old like saying is you sandwich it between two good things if you're going to give something that's not positive, I think that's wise. I think that's really good, but I think that's also predictable in a sense. And so, I've had conversations with people and it's like, oh gosh, he's telling me something really good. He's about to lay the hammer down, and it's like, I think that one thing that's really important in leadership is just being direct and just having an honest conversation, and so, but out of love. And it's like, the reason why I might say something that doesn't seem very positive to somebody is because I genuinely have a passion for them to be the very best at whatever they're called to be. I really, really, really do care. Now, how does that come across sometimes? Not always the most positive, but being able to just build the rapport, and that's where I would say like relational equity, it goes so far. And so like somebody knows that I am for them, they're going to receive what I have to say in a totally different light than somebody that thinks that I'm against them. And so being able to like make sure you spend time with people that are on your team, whether it's volunteer, paid, or whatever, just so that they actually know you care. And that can look like such a variety of different ways. And so when they don't see that, then taking constructive criticism doesn't go very well, no matter how much good stuff you sandwich it in between. So building that relational equity, having honest conversations, cutting to the chase, and let's get real. I don't want to sit around and listen to somebody talk for 10 minutes about how good I am just to tell me something I'm not doing very well. Just tell me. Let's move on. Let's get better at this thing and keep driving forward. Now, I'm not like everybody, so I totally understand that.
I like the fluff. I do better with the fluff. Please keep telling me all the good things.
Brittany says, butter me up first.
Yes, please.
Yeah. All right, speaking of that, you guys have had this position where, Pastor Jake is your supervisor. We do have these one-on-one meetings. He, honestly, his job is to give us constructive criticism at times. Can you give us some examples of where this process went well and maybe where it did not go well?
I think the times that it hasn't gone well were when there was like, honestly, I'm just gonna say it's normally me. Like I'm not in a place to receive it. Yeah, and then, or like I guess it's just like if I'm in the place where like I'm overwhelmed, I don't see the big picture yet. Like I've not been painted enough like specifics about a situation. Like that's when I sort of like I find myself like I get defensive, and then it's like, and then I think more times than not Jake's like, hold on, let me just tell you more, and then it's like I'm able to kind of see more, and then I come around to an idea or come around to like what I need to change just based on like, it really is like a receiving end deal of like, am I in the right place? Where's my attitude? Am I tired? Like things like that. Like, am I like really just overwhelmed with what's going on? And like, in what context was it presented? Like I think in sometimes it's like things are meant to be like an all-encompassing, like this is an announcement, but really it affects me or somebody else more than anything. And it's like, I slowly melt down. And so it's like, I don't really I needed more of a concentrated conversation than I did maybe a generalized announcement.
Yeah, and I think those are things you learn to grow in. And so as you know people that are on your team, you kind of know those that you need to have some of those one-on-one conversations. And so that's something that, like, I really have learned over this past year, like, hopefully well, but still got a lot of, growing to do in those areas. But is I kind of feel like I know that, like with what Brittany's just saying, it's like, hey, I'm going to prime the conversations a little bit, knowing where they're going, if they're large group announcements or something that is maybe a little bit big picture, but Brittany's maybe not in those conversations on a regular basis. I'm going to try to, like, have some side conversations or during our one-on-ones, like, hey, how do you feel about this? What would you think if we went in this direction? So I get this picture so that when we bring it to the table from a decision-making perspective, now I know how it's going to kind of interact with our staff, and there's not going to be those kind of things that, like, people kind of get upset about or bothered about. Now, until you learn that system, until you learn your people, it can be a real challenge. I think that might be some of the things, like an example would be of not doing it real well, whether I shared it improperly or maybe Brittany received it improperly, is just early on in relationships. It's like, hey, I haven't figured this out yet. And so, but the longer that you go on, the better constructive criticism gets. Do you think you do it
different with each of us? Because, I mean, our staff is very unique and different personality wise.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, that's the challenge of being a leader, is that now you have to learn multiple people. And so it depends on what your span of influence is or span of control is. You have to determine, I mean, maybe it's one person, maybe it's 20 people, something like that. That's not healthy, by the way, 20 people. But 5 to 7 really is ideal. And so you can learn 7 people's kind of personality and stuff like that. And then, you kind of navigate those seasons differently. You don't do it in an unfair way. It's not sharing something ahead of that, but it's being effective in your leadership.
Or even knowing, I think Brittany mentioned, keep buttering me up, knowing that maybe, Stephen or me or someone else wants you to go straight to the point. Whereas Brittany wants you to say something nice. I guess that's a good dynamic.
I'm also a girl.
Yeah.
Brittany, have you ever given criticism to Jake? And if you haven't, that's fine.
Every week. Criticism, not constructive, but criticism.
And I guess for both of you, because you both have people underneath you, whether it be unpaid volunteers or actual paid employees, how do you receive criticism from underneath that organizational chart? Maybe someone is below you in the organizational chart, but they do care about you. If we're saying that constructive criticism is best when people that care about you, how do you receive it from someone who is maybe under your authority or leadership?
I almost take it way more to heart than somebody over top of me that's in charge of me, because I feel like it's like I've almost failed them in some way, shape, or form, that they realize that something needs to be different. And so it's like I need to better myself. And so it's like I really want to hear from them. Like, I do have a leadership team of 6 wonderful, incredible people, and then I do have a part-time paid staff member, and like their constructive criticism about our ministry that we're working so in tandem with each other about is almost like way harder to take than somebody like that's my boss, because it's like they just expect a lot of me, but like it almost is like I have so much weight to do them justice and to help them out and to make things easier for them, because like we talked about, they're not paid. And so it's like I need to really take what they're saying to heart, or else like I'm really the one that has everything to lose too, because it's like they could just walk if they don't like it or something, or if they don't feel heard is the other part where I feel like I am just fallen short. And it's almost more pressure coming from somebody below you than somebody above you. But that's just me personally.
Yeah. I mean, I do get the opportunity to give what I would feel as constructive criticism to our lead pastor, Pastor Jason. And so, and that's pretty much on a weekly basis, in our one-on-ones. And so, evaluating so much of the church leadership, trying to make some decisions. And so I get to speak into a lot of that. And I think that the key to that is just, being honest and saying like, hey, this is where I'm at. However, I understand that if the leader doesn't want to go in that direction, you know what? I am 100% okay with that, and I will continue to drive forward in whatever direction that is. So I'm okay with knowing that my constructive criticism may not be taken. And I think that's a key to giving it, is to be okay with it not being received. And I think sometimes in life we struggle really, really, really bad with our ideas not being taken. It's like there's some offense to that, and it's like it's really not. It's really not. And so like for me to give it, I think that's positive. And when I receive it from staff, it is, sometimes it's tough because you have to realize like, okay, so where is this coming from? A place of I don't want to say education, but a place of knowledge. Like, do they really know what's going on? Because perception is reality a lot of times, and people see things or they feel things, and they sense like, okay, this is the way that it is, and let me tell you how it should be changed because I feel this, and so we have to filter that, and I think it happens with listening. And filtering, having conversations, asking clarifying questions, and then being able to go, okay, so should we? And I do agree with Brittany. Listening to somebody else speak into those things, it does carry a tremendous amount of weight because they're seeing things again like that I can't see, Pastor Jason can't see, other people can't see. I think about my wife giving me constructive criticism. She sees things in me that like I have no idea, the blind spots. And when she speaks into those things, like, man, I better listen because she really does understand.
Yeah, it really takes a team to get a pulse for how you're doing as a leader and then as a whole as well, because I really feel like I really value the people that are doing the same things with me, and that, like we said, like the blind spots, or like I'm doing something on Sunday while my whole team can probably tell me what went on better than I could just because of the way I'm like kind of removed from different things. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on both sides of the constructive criticism. I think one of the best working relationships is those two-sided ones with even in volunteers. Yep. You know, as someone who is under you, Jake, I feel like if I'm giving any kind of constructive of anything, you're going to hear it, but you being in the position you are have the whole picture. And as long as I'm heard, we leave that, and you're making a decision, and I'm sitting under your authority, and I'm very happy with that. Yeah. As long as you feel heard. Right, and I think you do a good job of making us feel like, listen, I heard you. You may or may not know everything that's going on, but I want you to know I hear you, and I'm going to make a decision. And like, you know, you still need to have respect for your supervisors, just like in church as pastors. You know, you hear things with volunteers, and they don't know everything, but you hear them and you receive them, and then you make a decision with that knowledge. And I think you both expressed that relationship working beautifully. So, look, constructive criticism is not fun to receive. You know, it's not a blast. No one says, "Man, let's go get some constructive criticism." Is constructive criticism worth seeking out? And if so, how do you do it?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. Like if you just want to stay stagnant in whatever you're doing and never change anything, then sure, because it will eventually die off no matter what. But if you're always open to learning, always open to hearing other people's opinions, always learning, always open to being better, then I mean, you always have to seek it out. Like half the time, when I'm done a Sunday, like I go straight to my leadership team. Like I know how I feel like it went, but like I'll go to them and I'll be like, how'd it go? Like, how do you think it went? Like, was there any major hiccups? Like I want to know because I want to fix it and I want it to be better, because if we keep like letting a broken thing keep happening, it's eventually going to really break and then we'll fall off. So
yeah, I mean, definitely constructive criticism is so needed in leadership. And I like to say, so we all want to be in a like leader developers, you know, or in a leadership development process. I mean, so developing is to be built upon and to grow in that. And so the first key to any leadership development is self-awareness. Well, the only way that you're really truly self-aware, I mean, you naturally are bent that way, you have personality, but it's by receiving feedback. Yes. And so the only way that you can do that is by asking people for feedback. And it is tough, it is uncomfortable, but if you're going to develop as a leader, you've got to be open to receiving constructive criticism and being able to filter the good, the bad, and the ugly so that you can get better.
Yeah. Would you guys agree that, like, to me, in my own life, seeking it out has been so important? Because I feel like, look, as much as we don't like to hear constructive criticism, people don't like giving it either. That's not a fun thing to do. And I find that most of the people who enjoy giving constructive criticism are the ones you don't really want to hear from. When you ask someone who you know cares about you, it seems like you always get the best from the ones that don't really want to give it to you. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Even with my wife, it's like when I'm preaching, I'm going to ask her, and you know, she, of course, I'm not always going to receive it great because I care a lot about her opinion, but I also know that she cares about me enough to give it to me. Does that make sense?
That's good. That's good.
Okay, so I think this has been very beneficial on a difficult topic.
Sure.
But before we wrap it up, just give me one or two things that you really want the audience to take away from this, or one of the things that you want them to think about as they go forward in this topic before we kind of close it out here.
Yeah.
I think my biggest takeaways are just always poise yourself to be in a position to receive constructive criticism from a place of someone is actually really caring about what you're doing, and they want what's best for you, or else they wouldn't be telling you something's wrong. So I think just like always checking your heart on how you are doing as far as like receiving things. I mean, we can hear the good stuff all day long, but the hard stuff is hard to hear sometimes. So I think just understanding, like, am I in a place to receive this well? If you're not, then it probably needs to be a pause for a conversation and then a restart at some other point. I think there's appropriate times and places to receive and give feedback. So I think discerning that as well is a big thing. I know for me, a Sunday morning is not really a whole lot of time when I have to speak to somebody or to be held liable for remembering anything. So I think just always assess, like, if you have something constructive you need to tell somebody or some criticisms, just make sure it's in the right place, it's the right time, and that you're coming at it from a place of love and that they're able to receive it as well.
That's good. That's really good. I would add that the idea of constructive criticism is filtered through the terminology of communication. Like, how well do you communicate what your heart is intending to say? And I think we all fail at that sometimes. Sometimes we're good at that. But it's, centered around being assertive, not in a negative way, but being able to share your feelings, share your heart, not just kind of hold it in. But more than a key is active listening. And so, like, listening not to just hear, but listening to understand. And so when we do that with criticism, that we can begin to filter it properly. And I love what Brittany said about just receiving it, being in a place to receive it. Even taking that a step further, I think if you say, what is a key, is how do you respond? Because you can respond out of frustration, you can respond out of anger, or you can respond out of, okay, I'm going to evaluate this, I'm going to filter this, and I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to put action to it. And that's how you get better every single time.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. All right, so thanks, Pastor Jake. Thanks, Pastor Brittany. We are so thankful that you guys could pour into a difficult topic, and we hope all of you listening out here benefited from that. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. If you didn't enjoy the podcast, leave us a 5-star review. Also, if you have any topics or questions you would like to hear us talk about, you can submit those at podcast@ignitechurch.com, or you can comment if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube below. We hope you guys have a great week, and thank you again for joining us on Ignite's Community Podcast.